Hitting is a form of communication. If you only work on stopping it, you're going to completely miss why it's happening. If you're here because your child is hitting, biting, or hurting other kids, this is the episode for you. Hi, I'm Mandy Grass, the family behaviorist, and these are 3 of my favorite little humans.
Hi, I'm on the podcast. Let's do this.
Let's do this. This is the behavior blueprint where we can figure out why kids do what they do.
Is that why parents yell sometimes?
Sometimes, because parenthood is messy, behavior is complex, but with the right blueprint, we can figure it out together.
Yay!
You've probably said, just like I have, we don't hit. We don't do that. And that's true. We absolutely don't want our kids to hit. But what we forget to focus on is, what do we want them to do? What do we want them to do instead? Replacement behavior. So when we're dealing with a child who's hitting, and we're going to get into function, the why that they're hitting, we really want to focus on why they're hitting and what we want them to do instead. When a child hits, parents feel an immediate need to make it stop, right? We want to escape that behavior. And it makes sense because it's scary. It can be incredibly embarrassing, disruptive, all of those things. But here's the thing. Stopping the behavior is not the same as changing the behavior. If I punish hitting, I might stop it. However, there's a huge likelihood that something else might occur, and it could be even worse. Hair pulling, biting, or even something else. I'm going to blow your mind a little bit. Your child's hitting isn't usually about the hit. It's about the function, and that determines how we respond. Remember, in my first episode, I talked about the 4 functions of behavior. I'll probably talk about it in every episode on here, because every behavior falls into one of 4 categories: attention, escape, access to something tangible, or automatic or sensory. In order to appropriately respond to hitting or any other behavior, we need to determine the function. We're going to get into that today, and hitting can serve many different functions. So we're going to get into the hits for fun, the hits for being silly, the hits because you stole my toy. We're going to break all of those down and give you tools for how to respond when hitting happens across any setting. Hitting is a skill gap, not a character flaw. Kids hit when they don't have an effective way to get a need met. That's true even on the days that they know better. Sometimes, often, hitting works. So, for example, a child might hit. It is a natural instinct, I promise. And depending on how we respond, that might increase the likelihood that the behavior will occur again. If Timmy hit Tommy because he wanted Tommy to get away, and Tommy jumps up and runs away crying, that worked for Timmy. Great. Now I don't have to deal with him anymore. So that behavior becomes reinforced. That's how behavior starts to get shaped. From your child's brain, even though you came back in and Tommy was in trouble for hitting Timmy, he wanted Timmy to go away, and he did. So we just want to keep that in mind when we talk about why behaviors exist. The bottom line is, hitting does not mean your child's aggressive. It means they're using the most effective tool that they have. And our job is to give them other tools to get their needs met. Most parents focus on consequences, lectures, threats, removal of privileges. Believe me, I have done every single one of those, right? When a behavior occurs, we respond in the way that feels the most authentic to us. Likely, if you're anything like me, the way my dad responded. But the reality is, in the moment, we're not really accessible to logic. One of the biggest things I work with parents on stopping is the why, especially if you have a little bit of an older kid, a 7, 8, 9-year-old, and they're getting into sibling conflict, being like, why did you hit her? The likelihood that they're going to have a logical answer, or they might say, I hit her because she was in my way. And then we're going to be like, what else could you do? All of those sort of things. If they could access another skill, they probably would have in that moment. What parents usually focus on, and honestly, it doesn't always work, are we're taught to focus on consequences, lecture, threat, loss of privilege. I have done all of these. I did them all the other day, right? When our child engages in a behavior, we open our mouth, and if you're anything like me, my dad comes out, and we default to probably however we grew up. But one of the things that parents do a lot is they ask why. My daughters got into a conflict. They're tussling with each other. They're hitting. And I go over and say, why did you do that? One, I'm probably going to get a I don't know, or she took my sweater, at which point I'm now lecturing about, I don't care that she took your sweater. You're not allowed to hit her. None of that is getting us where we need to be, right? Now, I am not saying that we should avoid or ignore the social emotional learning. We should absolutely come back to that. But in that moment of heightened emotions and dysregulation, the logical part of their brains is not accessible. So, we want to go back to that sweater example. We want to figure out the function, we want to replace the behavior, and we want to revisit the social emotional learning at another point where they might be more apt to be a little bit more aware of how they got there and what they could have done differently. When we lecture, threat, punish, again, done them all, we suppress the behavior temporarily, but we're not teaching that replacement skill. We're not teaching to the deficit of, I didn't know how to get my sweater back without, grabbing it from my sister's hand or pushing her. And so we haven't built a skill set for when this exact same situation, which will occur over the next probably 30 years, happens again. So we really want to work on why the behavior occurred and what we can do instead. I want to teach parents to zoom out for a second and really focus on what happened directly before the behavior occurred, what did the behavior look like, and most importantly, what happened directly after. Behavior doesn't happen in isolation, we're always part of the loop. One of the important things in working with parents is the biggest way to change your child's behavior, be it kicking, screaming, anything, is to be mindful about how you respond. Our response can make a big difference. There's a little caveat if it's sibling behavior, and we can get into all of that in future episodes. But giving parents the tools to understand behavior is where the behavior change really happens. So instead of punishing, threatening, taking things away, again, I've done all of that. We really want to focus on teaching a replacement skill, supporting regulation before escalation, and consistent adult responding. Consistency beats intensity every single time. Listen, I have 3 children. Sometimes I have 7 children in this home. And so I know how hard it can be to be consistent for a variety of reasons. You're tired. You just don't want to take it on in that moment. Maybe you didn't see everything that happened. Maybe you have low capacity that day and yelling is just going to make it stop in the moment. But the more consistent we can be, the quicker the behavior will change. Another thing we don't talk about enough is creating opportunities to practice this skill. Back to my daughters arguing over the sweater, if I say to them, like, you're never allowed to touch each other's sweater ever again, unrealistic, but also avoiding the conflict. We need to learn how to negotiate. So, in that particular example, it might be working on requesting. So, those are things that we want to keep in mind. How do we want to respond? My other thing that I want to tell you is when a behavior occurs, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, you respond in a way that you think is appropriate. Sometimes that works. Let me tell you a little side story. Lola was 3 and she swore, right? She heard somebody, definitely not me, could never have been me. And I was like, what did you say? Oh my God, we never do that. And she burst into tears, and I don't think she has ever said a swear word again to this day. However, Parker, when she was 3, said a swear word. I responded the same way, and she was like, wait a second, this annoys you? All right. So we might need to alter our responding for our children. With Lola, my gut instinct worked. I was a fabulous parent, and I didn't have to revisit it again. With Parker, I saw a pattern of behavior emerging and realized I needed to change the way I was responding. So, same thing here. If you're listening to this podcast, there's likely a pattern of behavior hitting, biting, hurting other kids. And you're at the point where you recognize the way you're responding is not changing the behavior. So now that we've discovered this pattern, let's talk about what to do about it. All right, now we're going to get into the function. Kids hit for a variety of reasons, functions, whatever we want to say. So let's get into some of those. For example, my daughter gets so excited when her cousins come over, and she's 3 years old and she gets so excited and she like runs over and like squeezes and hits her cousin. The function of that might be automatic. I am just so excited, my hands are going, right? It might be a sensory feeling. I just want to squeeze her, I want until she pops. So, what I want to do about that is recognize, okay, hey, now I've seen this pattern happen. We were together over the holidays. It happened 4 times. Her cousin's coming over again. I'm going to preview with her. Oh, when Ruby gets here, you get so excited. What are some things that you can do when you're excited? Name the replacement behavior, right? You could jump around. You could say, woohoo, you're here. You could say, let's go out to the trampoline and start running. I could give her something to hold. I could give her a fidget or a toy, because if there's a fidget or a toy in her hands, it's incompatible with being able to hit her cousin. The other part of this is I could give some reinforcement. Hey, when Ruby gets here, we're going to hold our hands like this and we are going to be so excited, and give them a specific activity to do so there's more structure to that first entry, and say, oh, if you are able to keep your hands to yourself, we can make hot chocolate for everybody. For example, it doesn't need to be food, but it's winter here. I'm just giving an example. So really think about, what are those moments that this is occurring? How can I preview what to do instead? How can I reinforce that? All of those sort of good things. Hitting for attention. Let me say this really clearly. Mad behavior is usually attention-seeking behavior. I want you to know that I'm mad. If your child is mad at you and they're running over and they're looking right at you and they're hitting you and they're staring at you and they're hitting you, or they're hitting you and they're running off and they're giggling because they know that you're going to have to chase them, we need to replace that. Often when we talk about attention-seeking behaviors, people will say, I'm going to ignore that. I'm ignoring that behavior. And I get that. That makes sense. It's attention we're going to ignore. We need to replace. If we don't replace, we're not teaching what to do instead. Also, have you ever been a parent who says, I'm ignoring that? If you're naming it, you're not doing it. So a couple of things that you could do for the kid that's hitting you and staring at you and running off. Move your body and say, I'll be happy to talk to you about that when you can show me quiet hands, and really show exactly what quiet hands means for you. If it's like folded in your lap or hands in your pockets, you can say, oof, I'll be happy to talk to you when you can say, I'm ready to talk, mommy. Outline how your attention is available. When we do that, we want to reinforce that immediately. Let's say your son is angry and he's hitting you, and you say, Logan, I'll be happy to talk to you when you can say, Mom, I'm ready. And he says, I'm ready. Oh, thanks so much for using your words. How you feeling, bud? Now, some of you listening to this are thinking to yourselves, I am not going to reward such a rude behavior. I hear you. I do. But we are shaping behavior, meaning we are taking small steps to change behavior over time. So that might mean reinforcing a grumpy face using his words because he was not using his hands. And listen, this isn't forever. I promise if he's still at 18 years old saying, I'm mad, you can come back to me. But we want to start there, right? So for a couple of weeks, couple of days, we're going to work on that. Then we're going to progress to, I'll be happy to talk to you when you can say, Mom, I'm ready, or Mom, I'm mad. And if in a couple of weeks he's saying, I'm mad, we might wait until it says, I feel mad. Hey, thanks so much for using your words in a kind tone. But I want you to remember, where are we starting? What is the first step towards where we want to go? Let's talk about hitting for escape. The function of hitting for escape is usually get away from me. Okay? And so when that happens, people usually do back off. Maybe it's even paired with a leave me alone. So your child is building magnet tiles and they are very particular about their magnet tiles when grandma is over and she sits down next to him and he swats her. Grandma might back up and say, oh, I'm sorry, I sat too close. We are filling in the gaps for our kids in that moment, right? Often we do back off. Maybe it's even siblings and the brother hits him and he runs to mom. Well, guess what? I didn't want my brother here. I wanted him to leave. I hit him and he left. It doesn't matter that mom comes back later with a consequence. When we do that, we really want to explicitly teach our child how to use their words. So in this place, if grandma sits down and your child hits, I would go over and say, oh, it seems like you want some space from grandma. You could say, Grammy, back up, please. Or Grammy, okay, I need a minute, please, or whatever that might look like. The idea here is we want to teach our children to escape appropriately. All right, this part I want you to listen really closely to. When we are trying to replace a behavior, whether it's attention, escape, anything for the hitting, we want to honor that as often as possible. So let's say your child has a history of hitting for escape. And every time they hit, somebody goes away. And every time they hit, somebody goes away. And it's really, really working for them. Well, now we're going to want to replace with like, can I have some space, please? Sometimes we as parents want to jump to tolerating. We're like, nope, grandma's sitting there. I hear you, right? And we will get there. I promise we will get there. But right now, what we need to do is let his words honor his feelings as often as the hitting did. If the hitting elicited grandma moving 100% of the time, we want the words, Grammy, leave me alone. Can I have some space? Move over, whatever, to elicit Grammy leaving 100% of the time at first. This is not forever. Remember, we're shaping. So the first part is I'm going to replace the hitting with requesting. And I'm going to honor that request because The hitting was working. I want the requesting to work. Don't worry, we will start to shape this. Meaning, let's say Grammy comes over every Wednesday, and let's say on the third Wednesday in a row, our child is no longer hitting, but they're saying, Grammy, leave, please. And we're like, all right, now it's rude. And we say, ooh, Grammy's going to sit for 1 minute, and then she'll give you some space. We're going to work on incrementally tolerating. Don't go to like, Grammy's not moving. We are working on this incrementally. We're shaping behavior. What is that first step? Okay, Mandy, you're telling me to leave sometimes, but it gets worse when I leave. He follows me around. You're going to think I'm crazy when I say this, but that is a great sign. When I work with families and we talk about the progression of hitting, tantrum, whatever that might look like, and I say to them, what would happen if you walked away? He's going to follow me. Great. That tells me this is 100% attention seeking. And the reason that is a really good sign is because we know exactly what to do with that. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to teach them how to get the attention, and we're going to remove it, and we're going to be super consistent with our response. Okay, so I was working with a family the other day, and they had a child like this. And I said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go behind a closed door. Here's the clear part, though. I want you to explicitly tell your child how to get your attention back. So if they come over and they hit you, and you say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go to my room so that my body can be safe. I'll be happy to talk to you when you can let me know you're ready. And then I want you to do that. And they're going to bang on the door, and they're going to throw a book. Obviously, we have to thread the needle, ensuring that they're safe and not breaking grandma's favorite vase that we have, all of that sort of stuff. But if you're able to do that, I want you to literally remove yourself to the greatest extent possible. And when they're at the door, say, I will be happy to talk to you when you're sitting crisscross. I'll be happy to talk to you when you can tell me you're ready. Whatever you want them to do, I want to be observable and measurable, meaning I want you to avoid saying, I'll be happy to talk to you when you're calm. Calm is really subjective, and you're going to get hit with the like, I am calm. And then you're like, you're not calm. Now we're in a power struggle. Okay. So I want you to be really explicit with them. This family that I was working with, we met up again 5 weeks later to talk about how things were going. And she had said that consistently responding using this method had been a game changer, that it had happened about 3 times. And on the third time, when he went to go hit her, he looked at her and said, please don't leave. And she was able to say, I'll be happy to stay with you if you can, I don't put your hands in your pocket, show me quiet hands, keep your hands to yourself, whatever that might look like. And it got to a point where the hitting was almost nipped in the bud completely because the function was attention and he knew she would leave if he hit. So we want to be as consistent as possible. One thing I want to keep in mind is that a behavior can get worse before it gets better. So let's say your child has been hitting for 6 months and it's eliciting your attention, understandably so. You need to keep people safe. We need to respond, all of that. It's elicited your attention regularly. When we start to pull back, they're going to be like, oh, wait a second. This was working for me and now it's not. So they might up the ante, like I said, and they might throw the book. They might stomp the feet. They might hit the wall. Please try to stick with your responding. Now, I can't give you a perfect time frame. I can't say do it for 2 weeks because it depends on the frequency of the hit. If your child is hitting 6 times a day, well, then this might change in 2 to 3 days because you have lots of opportunities to practice. If your child's hitting once a week, this might take 3, 4 weeks to change because there's less opportunities to practice, meaning less opportunities for them to come in contact with the contingency. So those are just a couple of things to keep in mind. We want our children to learn, if I use my words, I get my needs met. It doesn't also need to be words. It could be a nonverbal cue. It could be whatever's appropriate in your home. But we want to replace the hitting with a means by which to get your attention more appropriately in this example. Also, if your child isn't escalating completely, like maybe it's more of a nudgy hit or it's like a poke or whatever, you're standing in the kitchen with your husband and your other children, you can also remove your attention by just speaking to your husband. Like really take your attention away from the child. How was your day? Like what'd you have for lunch? How was that meeting? And you might see your child sort of up the ante and you can say to them, I'll be happy to talk to you when you say, excuse me, mommy, or whatever's appropriate in that moment. One of the things I'm doing here in these examples that I'm giving you is something called errorless modeling. I want you to avoid, I'll know when you're ready. I want you to be incredibly explicit about exactly what you want them to do. When you're sitting crisscross, when you've taken 3 deep breaths, when you can say, I'm ready. And you're going to model that. You're also going to model how to get your attention appropriately. Meaning, if the child is like interrupting or hitting because they want your attention and you're talking to your husband, I want you to model, oh, You can tap my shoulder and say, excuse me. Show them exactly what to do. We want to take any guesswork out of this. They don't have to figure it out. We're going to tell them. As with anything, we need to give this time. We need to be consistent in our responding. I always say this, and I hate the worst thing we can do is inconsistently respond. And I say that as somebody who is often inconsistent. But if there is a behavior you're really focusing on, let's say, your child's not getting out the door on time, they're not putting their shoes on, they are whining a lot and they're hitting, and you decide, hey, I'm really going to focus on the hitting. Pick one and really focus on that behavior so that you can consistently respond. I want you to be consistent because random responding, meaning sometimes yelling, sometimes lecturing, sometimes going to the other room, is called intermittent reinforcement. And so if your child doesn't know what's going to happen, and there's a preferred response, which might be dad totally loses his cool, or whatever the attention-seeking component in this example is that they're looking for, the inconsistent responding is going to increase the likelihood they engage in that behavior again. We want to decrease that. We want to give them a consistent response so they don't have to guess what's going to happen. X equals Y every time. And like I said, sometimes that's hard, especially I have 7 kids here. How can we hit every need? So you really have to say, hey, this week we are focusing on hitting and we are going to hold each other accountable and we are going to make sure we're responding really consistently. We're going to remove our attention. We're going to outline how to get it back, all of those sort of things. Just keep that in mind. Previewing can be incredibly helpful as well. I was thinking about a friend of mine reached out to me a couple of weeks ago. They were on a family vacation and they were like, the cousins are at each other's throats. What do I do? And I had suggested a group contingency, like they just hitting and arguing. I said, have them work together to fill a jar. But the other part of this is to teach them how to escape each other appropriately. So they ended up going to a party, and on the way there, the mom talked to the kids and was like, listen, sometimes we get overwhelmed when Timmy is all up in our business, and that's okay. If you need a break from Timmy, you can say, hey, Mom, I need a break, and I'm going to help you take that break. We want to be as explicit with our children as possible. That friend reached out to me and said, that night was so much better. Teach them how to escape appropriately. If they don't feel like they know how to get away, it might be like, if I tell Mom, if he hit me or if I complain or whatever, somebody's going to swoop in and separate us. We want to teach them, hey, you can separate yourself. You can say, oof, I need a timeout from this person. If you have been trying everything and it's not working, it is not because you're failing. It's because you're solving the wrong problem. Keep function in mind. Try to determine the function. If you have follow-up questions, you can check out my subscription-based platform called The Club, where I can answer all of your questions. If you're struggling to determine the function or come up with a replacement behavior, reach out. Let's talk about it. The Club has a community-based part of our profile where people talk about all the things that they're experiencing. You are not alone, I promise. But come join us. Let's talk it through, and let's help you come up with a replacement behavior that might be really effective in your home. Next, on the next episode, we're going to dive in a little bit more about replacement behaviors step by step. So make sure you check that out. If this podcast has helped you even a little bit, leaving a review is one of the biggest ways that you can help me. It helps other parents find the show, and honestly, it helps me know what's landing for you. You can do it right now while you're listening. I would really appreciate it. For information on topics like this and many more, come back to this podcast, The Behavior Blueprint Weekly, and you can always check out my content on Instagram and TikTok at The Family Behaviorist. Thanks so much.